Hello, and welcome to LØRN in collaboration with Smart Innovation Norway. My name is Silvija Seres, and my guest today is Valeriya Naumova, who is heading the Simula Consulting company associated with the Simula Research Laboratory. Welcome, Valeriya.
Hi, thanks, Silvija, for having me.
It's lovely to have you again. We spoke about 2 years ago soon, 1.5 years ago, about AI and the basics of AI and what people should learn and how you guys work with AI in Simula Research Laboratory, where you are a researcher.
Yes.
And then since then, lots of things have happened with Simula and also with this new company that we're going to be talking about. And your work on applying AI has had quite a lot of opportunities, to say it mildly, not least with Corona and this app for tracking infections. So we'll basically talk about practical AI and what's new. Okay?
Yes.
Very good.
Lovely.
So basically, to start with, maybe we could hear a little bit more about yourself. Who is Valeriya, and why did she turn out that way?
Yeah, I'm originally from Ukraine. My background is in applied mathematics, and essentially I studied in Austria and working on already machine learning or data-driven modeling project. And then by doing that, kind of visited quite a lot of countries and had a special passion towards Scandinavia. So I was very happy when I saw a job advertisement at Simula back in 2014. And was fortunate enough to get it and moved to Norway. And since then, changing some jobs inside Simula, but still having a lot of passion and fascinated by advances in technologies, machine learning, data-driven modeling, working in that domain, both from more theoretical perspective, but also more from industrial perspective on how these advances can be applied to science and science business needs or addressing societal challenges. Yes, so that's a short story of me coming to Norway. Yes.
Can I ask you on a personal note, what do you miss most from Ukraine?
I'm not so sure. I actually feel myself quite comfortable here, and actually left Ukraine 10 years ago, so it has been quite a long time. But of course, family is the one I miss them quite a lot.
Yeah, I have that with the Serbia, basically family and food, and certain landscapes. So a few words about Simula as well. I have a special passion for that institute. I was on their board for a long time and know many of the people who work there. Tell us a few words about Simula, and then tell us a little bit about this consulting part.
Yeah. So Simula is a research institute established in 2001, owned by the Ministry of Research and Education, but it's organized as a private non-profit company. So essentially, Simula combines best of both academic and industrial world, because Simula is focusing on basic research and education of young researchers. But at the same time, being organized as a company, it gives quite a lot of flexibility in making decisions or drive with more industrially oriented projects. And also, as one of the opportunities is to essentially try applying our skills and knowledge, or we say blue sky thinking and research, to address societal challenges and business needs, as we plan to do in Simula Consulting, which is a new consulting company established this year, and really happy to be in charge of it. So the idea of the company is to deliver our services to companies, and essentially to bridge the gap between academic discoveries and this cutting edge technology and cutting edge knowledge and real world challenges which are present in quite a lot of different business branches and industries, essentially showing people that a lot can be done with the current knowledge and technologies, and a lot can be done by using researchers from different domains.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, originally, Simula was very much focused on this blue sky thinking and research, data related one way or the other, for already then many important social needs. The fantastic research, I think, also on applied mathematics for health solutions, etc. But now you're trying to help the industrial world and the public world really understand how they can use this better and then apply it faster, perhaps. Because I think that there is a disconnect there, and it's a knowledge gap, first of all.
Yeah, exactly. And essentially showing them this deep technology, what it can deliver. And for instance, even to show how you can intelligently apply artificial intelligence, but not just use it as a buzzword or machine learning. And helps them to succeed and strive by using technologies, or we call it deep tech, by bringing advances from what's done at Simula. Yeah.
So just for our listeners who are maybe working for, an SME, small, medium-sized enterprise, or have a project in the public sector and are wondering, well, how, I know I need to do something related to artificial intelligence, something related to big data and data analytics, but I have no idea how to get started. How do they get started?
There are, of course, different ways, and there are different courses for new beginners or more advanced levels, which essentially describes what artificial intelligence and machine learning can do. They can read up, or, for instance, get in touch with different companies or service providers. And this is one of the advantages I find in the smart innovation Norway, and in particular in the cluster of AI, because it combines different companies, the companies which use services, also service providers, R&D institutions, which allows to work together and being able to help each other. And in particular, there was a workshop organized where there was also a essentially matching event, or kind of speed dating event, where different companies were put together to understand whether one company can help another by providing services or providing some kind of advice. Yeah.
And you were a part of this speed dating?
Yes, exactly. So it was extremely useful to get to know what people are doing, what are their challenges, and what type of problems they're looking at, and whether it's really needed to apply machine learning or other advances to address their challenges and needs.
I think that's a great idea, actually. First of all, to have this very efficient way of getting people to expose their challenges and their capabilities, and then try to see, how do you inspire them to get started tomorrow. That's one thing that I like about this process. And the other thing that you say, I think, is valid in absolutely every situation. You try to do something that seems unsurmountable, go talk to somebody who knows it. And basically talking to experts like you gets people off the starting point. And then it's a road that's long, but you still have to start somewhere. And there is help to be found.
Yeah, and I think that's really a great point of this AI cluster, that it allows not just have this first type of discussions, but also follow up, and they organize workshops and in detail discussions which allow companies who are willing to start with some advanced technologies to learn about this and to see the way forward. Yeah.
Very good. Now, if we talk a little bit more about maybe other companies is there anyone kind of from the cluster that you could highlight as a really interesting potential global story in AI?
I think there are quite a lot of candidates which have great ideas and working in different domains. So I would not highlight any specific company, but and I believe that there is quite a lot of potential from those companies, and a lot of them have very exciting ideas and have a lot of drive and focus and seem to be very knowledgeable in working in this domain. So it's very exciting to see what happens in 1 or 2 year lifespan.
Very cool. So basically, I think in AI development now, it's the applications that will be changing the world, not necessarily the deep research into deep learning or neural networks, but it's how do we find unique application areas that we know how to model better than anyone else in the world. And do you see any particular opportunities for Norway in this game?
Yes, exactly. I think we discussed in the previous podcast what was unique good in Norway and what Norway does uniquely well. And I think I still keep my opinion that in Norway, the great point is that there is really well preserved data sets which form the basis or foundations for applying machine learning. And in particular, as you mentioned also, we are working quite a lot in biomedicine and healthcare domain. And we see those huge data sets perfectly preserved, and they make a particular or perfect case for applying machine learning. For example, we are working quite a lot with the cancer registry in Norway, and we are looking at the data for the last 50 years with screening historical data of females, trying to figure out, to identify or derive personalized screening intervals for females to essentially prevent cervical cancer. This is one of the application areas. And having this access to data from around 2 million females and all the screening history, it just makes a big difference. And it's not so easily to get this access to the data in other countries. So healthcare domain seems to be extremely well-preserved data and not very common, or actually I would say a very rare case for other countries. In other domains, it also seems like data is available in much easier terms as in other countries. But of course, one needs to look on case-by-case basis.
Why do you like AI? What motivates you about the whole machine learning and application of it space?
So I've been working quite a lot with data-driven or machine learning in healthcare domain. And in particular for me, it's just to see how its applications allows or helps people with different disease, or for instance, for prevention or treatment of specific disease. And this is extremely rewarding for me. That's probably my main motivation for this. And it's also, I see what is the power of machine learning, that you really get great results, which you sometimes, so in many cases, you cannot do already as a human by using just a computer. So you see the power and you see all the potential, which just fascinates me.
What do you think are the most interesting dilemmas?
Yeah, so I've been quite a lot working with the Smitestop app. Of course, one of the dilemmas, and which was also quite a big topic, is the development of first of all, ethically sustainable and GDPR-based technology. This is the issue where, again, machine learning or artificial intelligence is facing quite a lot, how to develop ethical algorithms, but at the same time also preserving privacy of the data. And we have seen quite a lot of examples when, for instance, chatbot having a racist attitude, or some decisions in banks, for instance, for mortgage applications, again, having more racist attitude or being gender biased. So we see more and more examples of this kind of bias in the algorithm. So how to be able to ensure that your algorithm is not biased, preserving privacy, and ethically sustainable. That's one of the big dilemmas. Another dilemma, which I mentioned, is that open science is essentially open sharing of the data, knowledge, and results, but at the same time, to make it as open as possible, but restrict as needed. And it's kind of connected to the former questions, where we also need to think about privacy in some sense, and sometimes results cannot be shared or data cannot be shared with everyone. Yeah,
I think to me the word privacy is actually beginning to be a bit tenuous, or tiring, maybe is the right word. Of course, we need control over our data, but most people don't understand how much can be done with your data, and they just have this vague fear, somebody gets my data and I don't know what they do with it. So I think the more important thing here is to educate both the general population but also the regulators about what can be done with data, and then have a good dialogue with them. What do we want to do with this data? Because I think also the whole Smittestop discussion basically was an app for tracking infection by corona, and it used some geographical information and related information, and lots of people got really worried about what happens to this data. But really, very few people are worried about their Facebook data or Instagram data or their Google Home data or their Alexa data. And that data is far deeper and far broader than what Smittestop has actually gathered. And there is very little discussion, because basically we can't live without Facebook or Instagram, and we still feel we can live without Smittestop. So my thing is that I think we really need to explain to people why we want this data and what we are going to do with that data, and how they get value from giving us that data. And that's
totally agree.
the task, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also think that Strava, a lot of apps knows everything about you, but as you say, there was no discussion about data which people share willingly and not even thinking what type of data is shared. And when Smittestop was gathering data to essentially contribute to the Dugnat and helping
to the common
prevent,
project of stopping the corona spread.
And also that it has been ensured that the data is actually wouldn't be done publicly available, like opposite to Strava or Facebook. Then
would never be sold to anyone in any kind of other context than actually tracking corona by government.
Yeah, but that's education of the public and understanding what type of data is already shared and available publicly, and what can be extracted from that would be definitely very useful, so that we can better control the situation as happened in the summer. Before the summer.
I'd like to ask you a little bit more about this Smittestop as well, because it was a very cross-functional team. And, what was it like? And I think actually anything that you do in your applied AI field will be very cross-functional. So, can you provide some insights and maybe some advice on how to make the most out of your cross-functional teams?
Yeah. So essentially, Stop was additional challenge that the whole project was developed from home. So no one ever met for any meeting before actually July or early August now. Everything was done from home, and it was a really steep learning curve for us because it has been a project, as you say, it's very interdisciplinary, involving people from epidemiologists to software and app developers, up to lawyers and risk analysts, and also developing a project on essentially as a software developer, which is supposed to be used for mass usage by the whole population of Norway in a very fast way, and also being sustainable and reliable and essentially accountable. That all together was very challenging, but extremely rewarding working on this multidisciplinary team. And I would say that I'm very grateful to all the people who contributed, because people showed the best of themselves, just working crazy hours to deliver this project, and supporting each other at the same time, trying to motivate to go forward. Don't pay attention to maybe some negative press or some negative messages which appeared quite often through different social media, but just deliver and work on what we can do and how we can help people to essentially combat this disease.
Mm.
Yes.
I was working on providing stories about the Big Med project, which is the Norwegian Research Council, also doing kind of AI applications on data, medical data sets, genetic data sets. And the biggest problems they had were actually legal, not mathematical or medical. And I think there is also this other challenge about access to data sets, where we haven't defined a well enough understood role-based approach to data access. There are people who need to understand corona patterns that need a certain kind of access to data. Maybe the general practitioners need to access another kind of level. So this role-based access to data, I think, will be completely essential for us to continue to collect all this good data in a way that's actually shareable. Do you have any advice on that?
No, I agree that role-based data access would be something which come in more and more often in essentially ensuring data sharing. But in many cases, is of course, before providing this role-based access, one needs to ensure security of the data storage and integrity of the whole data storage, which is also quite a labor-intensive tasks. And it would be nice to see that. It would be very useful to see if there are more and more work done in the domain of developing how this procedure of the data storage and data sharing, either on the role-based aspects or as a common sharing, is more automated, and whether there are some tools for doing this in a secure and good manner.
So as a data scientist person as well, one of the things that I'm missing in the whole discussion about AI is, we talk about ethics, and then we also talk about, data centers, and we talk about enough of, network capacity. But all of that is just static commodity unless we actually are able to connect the data that live in those data centers across those data centers. And at the moment, we still live in a world of fragmented silos. And I think connecting those silos is what is necessary in order to make the unique value of what you were talking about with these wonderful data sets that we actually have in our public sector and in private sector, fulfill their potential.
Yes, that still remains quite far away from reach into the reality. But of course, more and more people start to talk about connecting different data sets, and like, for instance, for the healthcare data, but it usually takes more time than the whole project lasts to connect the different data sets.
You are now building a company. What are your guiding principles? What kind of advice would you give to other people in similar situation? What do you think is important? You have a huge opportunity. There is a huge need out there, but it's still a daunting task, as any entrepreneur will.
Yes,
agree.
I would admit that for me it's additionally challenging because all my career up to this year was in science and scientific management. So I don't really have entrepreneurship background, and it was a lot of learning on how, and actually different mindset. But what my understanding is of course team is the most important asset the company has, and one always has to take care of the team as a leader and ensures that everyone is healthy and productive, well-being. Another aspect is, of course, don't be afraid of a failure. Just having a company and especially working in the tech sector, failing is something which is accepted, and essentially one has to just learn from this and carry on. And finally, I would just say that innovating at a fast pace, and which is partially connected to the failure aspect, at a fast pace and being ahead of what happens today, being ahead for 1 to up to 5 years, is what helps company to develop itself, and also being ahead of competitors. That would be my advice from my half a year perspective of the being in the industrial sector.
You have some really interesting potential role models there, and I one of them I see you also list when I asked who inspires you, because you mentioned Demis Hasabis, the CEO of DeepMind. I think that Mustafa, who's one of his partners, is also now on a number of boards, including The Economist, or the parent company of Economist. So in Silicon Valley, at least, what we see is that scientists are becoming full pedigree entrepreneurs, and it's very difficult, in my opinion. I'm trying the same journey, because in science we have this idea that you have to complete everything. You have to go for 100% in order to publish. You have to go deep. In business, you have to go broad, and you have to use the 20/80 principle all the time. Make the most of what's most important, and then let's see how do you build on that. And it's almost a personality change. And I don't know if you have any experiences related to that. Do you find it's a very different game?
It is in some sense, because I also continue doing science, and in particular I have several projects which I continue to push forward, and I see exactly what you mean with 20/80, and then being very excellent, or being very in depth into science. Essentially, the switch between being an entrepreneur and scientist is something which quite challenging, because it's a different way one works when one works in a company or trying to establish new clients, and you have to be very proactive. You have to be driven, motivated, and energetic. At the same time, when you start thinking about scientific problems, you have to be much more focused and essentially, for instance, disappear from the rest of the world for weeks or days and work on a problem with a piece of paper and a computer. So it's a very different way of working, I would say.
Yeah. Very cool. Can you say a little bit more about why you liked or chose to mention Demis Hasabis as your role model?
So one of the aspects is, of course, he's mentioned as superhero of artificial intelligence, and DeepMind is essentially at forefront of developments in this domain, in this field. And one of the very appealing aspects of DeepMind is that they're much pro open data and open science in general. So most of the publications and results by DeepMind are shared. So and publicly available. One can get an access to their latest advances. Another aspect which really excites me or motivates me about Demis Hasabi or inspires me is the way he organized DeepMind. He essentially combines this research mindset and research focus on blue sky thinking and blue sky research with a drive and motivation of startups. Essentially, what he says that if he could have had a possibility to achieve everything what he wants in academia, then he would have done it. But he tried to essentially create a company which allowed him to do this cutting edge technology and research, which is not possible to done in academia because of more bureaucracy and different kind of pace of development in DeepMind. And another aspect is his optimism and positivity about the future of artificial intelligence and how it can address the challenges which society faces, like climate change. He talks quite a lot how technology can help to address it.
What do you see as the unique advantages of being both an entrepreneur but perhaps also a scientist?
Maybe bringing more insights into the problems when one discusses with companies and allows them to see what type of potential from their data or their workflow or their problems we can provide or by using technologies. And
But I was thinking more of the I have absolutely no doubt about the value of talking to people like you who deeply understand AI, but I was thinking more like, what opportunities do you see for Norway? It's a small country and it keeps forgetting how small it is, yet it does a few things extremely well. What do you think those things are?
So what I find uniquely well done in Norway is essentially adoption of technologies. For instance, during the COVID, we have seen that the new technology like the ordering app in restaurant was introduced, and it was adopted in extremely fast pace. So now, for instance, when we go to most restaurants have this app right now, and this adoption of technology, the level of adoption is extremely fast, and it's definitely much more difficult to achieve in countries which are larger. And this is quite a big advantage, as I find it, for Norway to be able to adapt and things in a very fast and in some sense flexible way as well.
Lean as a country and perhaps also as a regulator, and that's one of my big dreams, is that we move leaner towards, because I think the way we regulate this whole AI driven future is also, you know, very much looking towards the past and trying to adjust the past laws into something that I think will be genuinely different, and that'll be a whole new area opened up for possible innovation.
Yes, exactly.
Where do you learn? Where do you go to keep updated?
So there are different sources I usually read on a daily basis. I really love Medium, which is a website created by the developer or the developer of Twitter, and essentially it's is aimed to serve similar purposes Twitter, but allow for longer articles and 140 characters. And it's an example of social journalism where more professional and less professional people can contribute with different insights, their stories, or overviews of different technologies. So this is a platform which contains a variety of topics, from technologies to leaderships and commercial aspects, marketing. It's a really useful platform if one wants to know about new advances in described in layman's term and in an easy and accessible way. For keeping updated with advances in the or latest state of the art is, of course, reading papers from conferences in machine learning. That's kind of a must, I would say. And also referring to big tech companies' blogs, which usually publish about their recent achievements.
Towards the end, I want to ask you two things. One is your perspectives from the Corona crisis in terms of digital work, and then the other is any sustainability issues that you're particularly keen on.
Yeah. So the first one is, of course, under lockdown and working in this from home offices with digital meetings online, we learn what can be done and what works and what doesn't work. As mentioned before, the whole Smitestop project was developed from home. So it was quite a lot of meetings and work during the Corona crisis. I think what we learn is, what Corona taught us or gave us a better insight is how to achieve a better balance between home offices, so that we ensure and maximize our productivity and efficiency, at the same time keeping flexible and allowing people to choose what's best for them. Another thing which was particularly important for me is to understand that during these digital meetings and we are losing the personal touch, and sometimes we ignore that people have different needs in social interactions and physical meetings. And therefore, it's extremely important to be very careful with the way one communicates and spend extra time on taking care of the team and kind of taking care of people and asking additionally how well they feel and what are their needs. That's probably lessons learned from the Corona. If you're talking about the sustainable things, I would probably again refer to Demis Hasabis, because I really loved his speech on discussing on the use of AI and how does he see it helps to address different challenges. So in particular, he talks about the grand challenges like climate change and inequalities. And he says that he would have been quite negative or pessimistic towards the development or addressing these challenges unless AI would be down the road. Because there are two ways to go. It's one of them is, for instance, addressing climate change is to change how people behave. And this change has to be quite drastic, to be more collaborative, to be less selfish, and to be more transparent and work towards a common goal on a global scale. But at the same time, this current geopolitics is not showing that it's going to happen. Another way is to increase or improve technologies which allow to address at least several challenges related to climate change. And this seems to be a more feasible way to go, at least to prioritize it, in addition of changing behavioral and political patterns.
I personally deeply disagree with Demis here. And I think he has a terrible view on humanity. And that's one of my main worries about allowing people like that to run some of the most powerful companies in the world, where they basically say, step aside, all of you politicians, statisticians, philosophers, and the normal people in the streets. We technologists are going to fix this world for you. Because I think if there is one role for humans, it's to keep fixing our world. And I think that technology has to stay our tool, not our master. And he believes that technology should be our master. And that is my main worry for the future, is that people like Denis become a little too powerful, and because we are unable to move fast enough on our work with sustainability, they become the composers of our future, and there is very little role for human responsibility in that future.
I tend to disagree with you a bit, because he does not exclude one or another direction. He says that technology should complement, and maybe at this point, development of technology should be prioritized, because it doesn't seem like the current situation, global situation, will allow to prioritize human behavior. And of course, we know that local changes cannot lead to the global impact. So,
yeah, I think that's one of the kind of journeys that Silicon Valley, in this case also Cambridge, needs to make in terms of. I think they're incredibly technocratic. And we are. I think we're missing the Martin Luther King, who believes in people and their ability to use this technology in a concerted way, but take on some responsibility as well. But I think Norway might be one of the very few places where this can play out really well. Actually, because we are so used to doing these dugnads, and we trust the system, and we can, I think, be moved in the same direction relatively fast. And that's one of the things we've seen from Corona as well, that we march in the same way once we are given clear marching orders. And it'll be a really, really interesting 10 years ahead of us, Valeriya. I think this game is going to be played out really fast, which is also why it's super important for companies and for the public sector to learn about AI and get on with applications as fast as possible if they want to have a say at all.
Yes, that's I totally agree. And education, I think, is something what's still lacking, or it still has to be at a much bigger scale for for different levels, for general public, for professionals at different scales. That's what we need more.
And that's where we need, we providers of lifelong education need people like you, who can provide us both with the technology and the theoretical underpinnings, but also very much the case stories, because people remember cases. People will remember Smittestop, and people will remember, the cervical cancer application, and people will remember the food industry optimization from Volur. And I think these are the kinds of stories that people need to at least have heard, which is why it's really important that you keep telling the stories.
Yes.
Do you have a life motto of some sort?
Yes. So I have also several quotes which essentially help me going. And I think the best quote by Nelson Mandela is, "I never lose. I either win or I learn." That's something which really appealing to my life motto, and that everything what happens is for the best, and one just needs to continue going. And I just want to cite the CEO of Simula is keep calm and carry on. That's was his phrase he used quite a lot during the Corona time, and which really helps and motivates people to continue.
I like your Maxwell quote as well.
Yes, it was essentially saying that the pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist expects it to change, and the leader adjusts the sails.
Yeah. And I think that adjustment of the sails with the applications of AI and with all this new regulation is perhaps the most important task that we should be doing as the country. So thank you for helping the good work, and thank you for
Silvia.
Thank you for also participating in this podcast, where we are basically trying to demystify some of the good work that is happening related to the Smart Innovation Cluster in AI and its industrial applications.
Thank you, Silvia, for having me. Thank you.
And thank you for listening.